Apologies in advance. I've done my best to fix the audio on this episode. I've got it as best as I can without it distorting too much, but I broke my microphone and didn't realize it had defaulted to recording with the alternative microphone. I've since got another microphone, but work-life balance kind of gets in the way, and I've not been able to fully re-record this episode. So, yeah, the audio isn't the usual standard, but I've done my best, so apologies.
Hello there. Welcome to the hypothetical war between the Cardassian Union and the Romulan Star Empire. Between these two superpowers-ish of the Alpha and Beta quadrants, just who exactly would come out on top? Who has the better skills? Now, in previous episodes in this series, if you've not watched, there's hopefully a link to that entire playlist somewhere, probably here. And we've delved into elements of both empires, particularly the Cardassian, as the Romulan Empire was covered more extensively in the Romulan vs. Klingon series, which I also recommend you check out, and hopefully we'll link to that playlist in this video as well. Despite all things looking in favour of the Romulans, would they really win in this conflict? We have to factor in a few different variables. Now, a lot of this is subjective, as the Romulans and the Cardassians have never actually had a direct confrontation, only shadow wars sort of happening in the background. And by that I mean typical intelligence agency stuff by two powers, where they're constantly trying to one-up each other. One time we did see these two states work together, which I covered previously, so we'll just gloss over here, was when the Tal Shiar went rogue, and the Obsidian Order went rogue, worked together to try and destroy the Dominion, failed miserably, but actually allowed the destruction pretty much of both agencies, particularly the Obsidian Order, and made both empires more vulnerable to Dominion attack. Not a good start, but we'll forget about that because that's a future. We'll set this theoretical war in 2369 with the assets both powers had at their disposal at this period. This is before the Dominion War, but after the Cardassians had already left Asia. So, how would this war take place? Now, there are different variables we can factor in. The one thing I can say with some confidence is this would likely be an ideological war between the two, or at least that's what it's going to be for this scenario, and it would be more about disabling or neutralizing the threat posed by the other's military to the interests of that particular power. Likely the goals of both states would be similar, but I can see that the Cardassians would, off the bat, be likely on a more defensive footing. Hear me out. Cardassian ships are strong, they operate like wolves. They need numbers. Now, I would actually posit the theory that the Cardassian Navy is probably just as big as the Romulan. They control less territory, and therefore easier to defend. Romulan ships are faster and longer range. Cardassians have at least as many ships concentrated in a smaller area. Thanks to starved resources of the Cardassian Empire, I can see power projection being a problem. Not to mention, they're not a race that play well with others, and at this time, they have been engaged with Bajorans for a while and now have the Maquis to contend with. The biggest obstacle to both powers is the Federation. The Klingons, they're not going to care. Breen, Tholians, Gorn, Miradorn, these races all in the local area, they're not going to care about what's happening between the Romulans and Cardassians, except how it might ultimately affect them. Races close to the Cardassian border probably don't like Cardassians very much, probably don't trust Romulans, and the same vice versa. Races living close to Romulan territory might not trust Romulans. The one thing I will factor in here is the Klingons are one of those races. They don't like or trust Romulans. It is plausible that the Klingons would come to the aid of the Cardassians in order to help fight them. But we're not going to include that scenario because that tips the balance in an unfair advantage to the Cardassians. So the Klingons in this scenario, they don't. This is a straight fight between the two powers with no one intervening on either side, except maybe the forms of humanitarian aid, which doesn't matter on a tactical sense directly. And quite frankly, we're not getting into it. And most likely, that would be the Federation. You can assume the Federation is running around trying to save everybody. Stop the war, but they're failing, so we'll just neutralize it. The Federation, however, would not allow either power to establish bases within their territory or across them. Neither the Romulans nor the Cardassians would want to antagonize either the Klingons or the Federation to provoke them into this war. Now, with the Cardassians starved for resources, it would be difficult for them to power project beyond the borders. So this would likely, to my mind, be an act of Romulan aggression against the Cardassians. And the Cardassians would instantly be on a defensive measure. But with organizations like the Obsidian Order on their side, the Cardassians wouldn't find it difficult to at least at some level strike back against the Romulans. We do know that individuals like Garak, allegedly, while a member of the Obsidian Order, was actually able to operate as an undercover gardener on Romulus, close to the Romulan Senate. For what purpose, we don't know, but we can assume that if he's able to do that, it's plausible with how well the Obsidian Order operates, which in my opinion is far better than that of Tal Shiar. They're going to be able to infiltrate and maybe even get it close enough to eliminate a few senators, a few other high-ranking Romulans. But how that would actually affect the war, probably just antagonize the Romulans. So look at the assets of both powers. Break it down. Likely, they're not going to try and meet in the middle. The Cardassians in this war know that they're not going to be able to power project and invade Romulan territory. They'll send marauders, they'll send Obsidian Order agents, and they'll try and get other races to do it very for them. But ultimately, the Cardassian effects on Romulan territory is going to be minimal, meaning the Romulans can spare far more forces to send out to Cardassian territory. The Cardassians might get daring and try to take advantage of the weakened state of Romulan defenses, but with the projection of distance, the inability for them to maintain forces far away from the territory, and the sheer strength of Romulan vessels and defenses versus those of the Cardassians, I don't see it happening. Now, as I said, the indisposition of forces, they've probably got similar numbers. Infantry might actually be on the Cardassian side. I think the Cardassians probably have a bigger infantry force, a much more experienced one as well, because they've got Bajoran occupation. The Romulans, however, have the Revan, the entire race at their disposal they can use, plus their own soldiers. But I believe the populations of these two races are lower than those of the Cardassians. That is only a theory, but the Romulans, remember, are a splinter race from the Vulcans. They've only had a bit over 2,000 years to increase in number, and it's possibly the same with the Regans. We can go on the Romulans, Regans, and Brune to sort of clarify that. Now, so instantly, Cardassians are probably going to predominantly backfoot. They're going to look at defending their territory. We know the Cardassians are very good at this. We see in the future war, which hasn't happened yet, but the Cardassians are very good at localized defenses. They can rapidly respond to a lot of ships very quickly to a trouble spot. They're very good at entrenched defenses. They're not good at letting go of territory that they've already got their hands on. So Romulans are going to fight every inch of territory they take in the Cardassians, and neither side is going to take prisoners. The Romulans have an instant advantage. Their ships, the warboards, are larger and stronger than pushed by the Cardassians. Several Cardassian ships are going to be needed to overwhelm a single warbird. Romulans, however, are known for retreating a little easier than Cardassians, so a fight or flight. Combine that with Cardassian tactics of sort of hit and run and evasion, the Romulans might find it difficult dealing with the Romulan cloak. Will give them something of an advantage, something that they didn't really have with their Vulcan Klingons theoretically. But here, the Cardassians can't, as we know, penetrate Romulan cloak, and they don't really have any way of tracking Romulan vessels like that. So the Romulans will be able to hit and infiltrate Cardassian bases far easier than vice versa. But again, Cardassians are good at rapid response, and they're also good at wars of attrition. They can take the beating, and they're prepared to suffer as long as it means victory and not surrender. And the propaganda machine of the Cardassians would be in overdrive. Recruitment would see a massive uplift. The Cardassian military would see a huge power projection of forces. Now, in terms of technological capabilities, the Romulans have a huge advantage. They are technologically far more advanced than the Cardassians. Their ships are larger, more powerful, more heavily armed. But the Cardassians, in the local defense, do have more. Now, as I said, they probably have an equal number of ships. Hypothetically, it is only hypothetical. But the Romulans, of course, are not going to send every ship in the Navy. They're going to send less than a third of the Navy at most to deal with the Cardassians. So this is going to be a tentative war for them. They're going to slowly try to inch away at them. The objective goal is to cripple the Cardassians, not necessarily conquer them. I see the Romulans would make several early victories in this conflict. They would annex territory very rapidly from the Cardassians, quickly stagnate, fighting a war of attrition against an enemy on its own territory with superior numbers. So the Romulans, they're going to default to a few secondary ideas, similar to what we saw with the Klingons fighting the Cardassians. We're forgetting the Maquis as well as other factions in the area. It's very likely the Bajorans would stay allied with the Federation and keep out of it, but the Maquis, they're not going to think the same way. Just like when the Klingons went for the Cardassians, the Maquis had volunteered their help. We'd see the Romulans coordinate with the Maquis, very likely providing them with weapons, maybe even cloaking devices, much like the Klingons did. Meaning the Maquis will become a greater threat, and the Cardassians would have to expend more resources in trying to neutralize that threat while trying not to drag the Federation into the war by attacking the colonists. And the Romulans were probably going to great lengths to do the same. They try to look like they're the protectors of the market, protectors of the Federation colonists. Again, trying not to antagonize the Federation and drag it into the war. So you've got two sides hitting each other with very different military strengths. And what are those strengths exactly? Cardassians are good at rapid response, they're good at being very brutal. But so are the Romulans. The Romulans would have a weakness in that they have fewer ships stretched over a large area far away from the territory. Now, depending on how you look at this, resupply for the Romulans would be long. Those Cardassian superior numbers would have one great advantage. You can hit the Romulans where they hurt their supply lines. One of the Romulans' key objectives early on was to try to neutralize the Cardassians' ability to force project in any way, hurt their ability to stockpile and supply their ships, build new vessels, as well as annex territory where the Romulans would also stockpile supplies, food, maybe even produce materials, as well as garrison Romulan Demon soldiers to project further into Cardassian territory. Those would be priority targets for the Cardassians, which would mean of that already limited Romulan force sent to the Cardassian territory, they would have to hold many of their forces back to protect these assets, as well as patrol areas of these extended supply lines, which remember wouldn't be allowed to go to Federation territory. They'd have to go over it, under it, around it, which would make them very vulnerable to Cardassian raiders. Which my guess would be these Kadeki class and Gala class vessels raiding along those lines, making sport of Cardassian transport, Romulan transport rather, which likely didn't have much in the way of defenses to really protect them. They might have tried to rely on mercenaries, but a Romulan warbird is an expensive vessel to supply command. Other Romulan ships in the era are no as powerful, although we can assume they've still got battle cruisers, maybe some birds of prey knocking about, maybe even some variant smaller warbirds. You never really see them, so I can't guarantee that they have them. They probably did. It's an assumption, but let's face it, they probably did. A Romulan transport is probably armed, especially a military one carrying troops. So they're not an easy target, but compared to the warbirds, they are a soft target. So let's get to the next part. What kind of forces are they actually dispersing? We know that the most powerful ship in the Cardassian fleet is the Keldon class cruiser. The most powerful ship at this time in the Romulan Navy is pretty much the Dederic class. There are a few other classes of warbirds, like variants of the design, but generally speaking, the Dederic is the most ubiquitous. But the Keldon class, although powerful than the Galler and other ships in the Cardassian fleet, is not the most common. That would be the Galler class destroyer. They are by far the most common. They're nowhere near as heavily armed or as powerful as the far superior Keldon class, but they do have a lot of them. Now, these ships on their own are no match for Romulan warbirds, but in numbers will be able to cripple and destroy them. And both the Romulans would be hoping to neutralize the Cardassians quickly, whereas the Cardassians would be hoping that they could make the war draw out, which would force the Romulans into the diplomatic table. In terms of other forces and assets they have, as discussed previously, the Cardassian Navy and Army are pretty much integrated into several different orders that have elements of both. The Romulans separate the Navy and infantry. The Romulans have an army, but they predominantly rely really on the Reman shock troops. The Reman do have some warships that they can field, vessels similar to the Scimitar, but we don't know a great deal about them in this time period. It's likely they're mostly transports and maybe some kind of birds of prey. The Scimitar is supposed to be based on pre-existing designs of Reman vessels, which I know any as powerful as the Scimitar would be. Bear in mind the Scimitar doesn't exist at this time, but we know they have very competent commanders at this time, like Shinzo. He's already operational at this time. Now, so there are some very competent commanders on both sides. You've got Gul Dukat and Gul Yvek and a few others who are quite competent on the Cardassian side, and you've got competent commanders on the Romulan side, such as Sela, who would likely be playing a prominent role. Now, her specialty is going to be more on the underhanded, but both of these civilizations have these same strengths. Ultimately, they wouldn't be able to outmaneuver and outsmart each other behind the scenes. They're both ruthless, cruel, callous, and they're good puppet masters, but the Cardassians are better at fronting assault. Now, because both sides will be countering each other's shadowy moves in the background pretty effectively, I don't see either side making much ground in that area, so I think they'd have to rely on sheer brute strength. The Romulans would be working from a position of perceived strength, but actually a little bit of a weakness. Long way from home, vulnerable supply lines, limited personnel, every loss is actually a bit more of a catastrophe to the Romulans in this war, in this area. They'd be hoping for a lightning victory. We willing to sacrifice as many Reman as necessary to fix the world. However, that kind of tactical thinking would result in the depletion of manpower very rapidly on the Romulan side. So the Cardassians manpower would not be suffering a shortage. The Romulans would have to quickly try to neutralize the Cardassians' ability to wage war, rather than the actual numbers overall. So that's, I think, what it will ultimately come down to. It will come down to a slugging match, and who will be most willing to endure that slugging match in the long run. I think this would become a tactical victory for the Romulans. They would easily defeat Cardassian defenses, but would eventually hit a wall in that they couldn't pump enough troops and ships into really completely overwhelming the Cardassians quickly enough for the Romulans' tastes. However, I do believe the Romulans are a far tactically superior people to the Cardassians, but the Cardassians, like the Romulans, are willing to make massive sacrifices in order to win. This wouldn't be like the Cardassians and the Klingon War, because then they were under a civilian government that didn't really have the iron spirit of the military government of the Cardassians. This will be the Cardassian military government. They'd be more than willing to make whatever sacrifices were necessary in order to defeat their enemy.
Okay, very quickly to cover this and interrupt myself. If the audio's been a little weird, I kind of broke my mic. It was plugged into the front of my computer, and yeah, it's not been using that microphone. It defaulted to the microphone on the camera, and that isn't the best microphone I've got. But ultimately, I do think the Romulans would likely prevail, at least in their tactical objectives. It's whether or not the Romulans would really want to waste the manpower and resources to fully occupy and control Cardassian territory. They're not going to care about the Maquis' efforts, but they will care about whatever their tactical objectives are, or whatever the Cardassians are standing in the way of Romulan expansionistic goals. That would likely be neutralized. Now, if by chance the Romulans, I do believe, wanted to completely subjugate the Cardassians and defeat them outright, I do believe they have the military strength, more than enough military strength actually, to completely break the Cardassian Empire in half and force it either into a surrender or at least into a capitulation. And I don't think the Romulans would struggle necessarily to achieve that goal as long as none of the other major powers got in the way. I think the Romulans were more than capable of doing that, but they would suffer horrific casualties in doing so, because the Cardassians would make them pay for every inch of territory. So, there we go. But, that's my opinion, and it is only an opinion. Do you out there think that the Cardassians stand a much better chance of actually outright defeating the Romulans, and some other variable might actually give the Cardassians the edge? It is plausible that the Cardassians could pull an ace out of their sleeve, a rabbit out of their hat, a miracle out of their ass, and actually win, but I wouldn't personally bet on it, but perhaps there's some Cardassian fans out there that might actually be able to correct me. There are some extremely competent and very, very ruthless Cardassian commanders, many of whom would not struggle at all in dealing with the Romulans, and they would come up with some very inventive and clever ways to outwit and outmaneuver their Romulan adversary. But again, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And again, I apologize for the bad audio. I've had to get this new microphone because I can't find a wire for the other one, another wire. So yeah, it recorded purely with the camera's microphone, and the camera is already not the best. I already need a new one. Re-recording this has been difficult, so I've had to stick with the original audio. It's one of the reasons that recently, if you're watching this when I've just uploaded it, I've not really been uploading much recently because it's kind of been a bit awkward because the microphone on the camera is not great. I've only just got this one, and the other microphone I now can't use. But we press on. We persevere, much like Romulans in their war with the Cardassians. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and we're at the end of this video now. Bye-bye. I'd just like to say a thank you to everyone for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy making these. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving a like, share, and a subscribe, and maybe checking out the other videos on the screen right now, and in the description box below there are links to my other social media accounts.